Hello students, good morning everyone. So let us continue straight away with the next topic. Okay, in the previous class we have seen up till this page number 130 under archaeological sources, that is monuments and buildings. So the archaeological sources, that is continuing with the same but with a different subtopic, that's inscription, right? That is where we are about to start, page number 131. Inscriptions, in simple layman's term, those writing, okay, which are engraved on the solid surfaces, including rocks, metals, pillars, stones, and some other structures. Those are called inscriptions. And these inscriptions are written in various languages and scripts, okay, of the earlier ancient days. And this inscriptions also actually provides us the record of the royal proclamations, okay, the declarations of the royals, or you can say the religious instructions, and gifts to temples, people, or village. So these are the informations that we get from the inscriptions, page mentioned in your text, page number 131, under the topic inscription. First, second, third line, or you can say the second sentence, I will just read. Written in various languages and scripts, these inscriptions record royal proclamations, religious instructions, and gifts to temples, people, or villages. Many of these available even today are attributed to the Rajput and Chola rulers. It contributes, it gives us an information about them, about the Rajputs. We have already discussed about Rajputs, the Chola rulers. Besides, there are several inscriptions on the walls of the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, and other palace walls. All these inscriptions usually tell us about the underline. All these inscriptions usually tell us about the social and economic condition of the people, and sometimes even provide dynastic list of kings or their genealogies. Hmm? So, what role does this inscription play? They tell us about the social society, economical, the financial condition of the people of those days, of those period, under those rulers. Next, we have coins. What do we get to know from the coins? What sorts of information does they provide us? Coins gives us invaluable information about the polity and the economy of a period. Polity, first of all, polity means the governing system. You can say that the politics, okay, and economy, the financial condition of the people of that or period, or the financial condition, the wealth, the treasure of the king, of the ruler, or of that era. The writings on the coins generally convey the names, dates of issues, titles, and portraits of king, and occasionally even their dynastic emblem. Underline, the writings on the coins generally convey the name, date of issue, titles, and portraits of kings, and occasionally even their dynastic emblems. So these are basically, even though it contains these things, a coin, but that provides us an information. We get to know about that particular king. We get to know about the title, or you can say the name of the king, the date when it was being issued. Through the date of that particular coin, we also come to know the period when that particular king ruled. Coins throw light on art, religion, economic condition, trade, etc. The composition of the metal or alloy used in the coins tell us about the scientific advancement attained during the corresponding period. Underline this. Now, basically, the metal which was used for making coins tells us about the scientific advancement. Because in order to convert a metal in the form of a coin, you need various tools, technologies, and all. So, if during those days they could convert a piece of metal into a coin, that means it tells us that they were advanced in the sphere of technology, or in the field of what do you call tools, instruments, and all. And otherwise, that wouldn't have been possible for them to convert a metal or give it a shape in the form of a coin. Moreover, the distant places where the coins are excavated give an idea about the extent of the empire. Another thing, yes. Now, for example, say a king, okay, a king who resided or whose palace was in where? Say North Guwahati, example. A king whose palace was in North Guwahati and a coin of that particular king. That means the coin must be, it must be found somewhere in and around North Guwahati. But supposing we see this, what do you call, the researchers, the historians, okay, or the archaeologists, they found this piece of coin which was being issued during the time of this particular king in Nandwadi, in say far distant place, say for example where, say Tejpur, say Jorhat and all. That means it also gives us a clear picture that even though the king had his palace here in North Guwahati, but his empire, okay, his territory was extended up till that area. Otherwise, how will the king coin go? Yes, at times it also gives us an information because of trade, maybe business purposes that was held between this particular king and the king of that area. Even that, and that is one more information which we get. So likewise, the distant places, where the coins are found, it gives us extent about the extent of the empire, okay, about the boundary of the empire, about the large area, be it his own or be it in the form of trade. That means he had connections, he or she, the king, the ruler. But earlier days, especially, yeah, it was only king, male, no he. Okay, because our monarch system, monarch means king, monarchy. It was only granted to male, not to females. Next, the Sultan of Delhi, the Mughal emperors, the Cholas, and other regional rulers issued many coins. Some of the examples of some of the kings or kingdoms who issued coins: the Sultans, underline, the Sultans of Delhi, the Mughal emperor, the Cholas, and other regional rulers. Next, we have painting and sculptures. Painting and sculpture also give important information about medieval Indian history. The paintings reflected themes of religion, forest life, court scenes, mythological stories, lifestyle of people, and food habit of the time. Something like that. The paintings reflected. What do we get to know from the painting? It gives us information about the religion, the forest life, the court scenes, mythological stories, lifestyle of people, and food habit of that particular time. Different styles of miniature painting also evolved during this period. The bronze sculpture of the Nataraja, that is the dancing Shiva, is representative of the sculpture produced during the period. The sculptures were made of bronze, wood, or stone and depicted figures of gods and goddesses, queens, and kings. Underline the last sentence. The sculptures were made of the material which were used for making the sculptures: bronze, wood, or stone. Okay, and also the page number 131, right hand side, under the topic paintings and sculpture. Just now the line which I read, the bronze sculpture of the Nataraja, that is the dancing Shiva, is representative of the sculpture produced during the period. Which period? We're talking about the medieval period. Underline that. Next, we have the literary sources. Under literary sources, we have court chronicles, we have autobiographies, biographies, writings of foreign traveler, religious literature, we have regional literature, and calligraphy. All right. So basically, we have one, two, three, four, five, six subtopics under literary sources. Let me just give you an idea of literary sources. Okay, the subtopics can be discussed in the next class. But what do you mean by literary sources? You know, with regard to our understanding, okay, of the medieval period, the Indian history, which comes from the plethora of written sources. What do you mean by plethora? Again, as I told, did I tell you? I don't remember. All right. Those words which are written in bold in between the text when we read. The meaning of those words, if you just pay attention, it's written at the end of the text. If you just flip the pages, there is a box which is being titled as glossary, okay, meaning. Under that, you will find there are various word meanings. Please, you have to mug it up. You have to memorize those words. So plethora, see, a large amount of something. Likewise, so, with regard to our understanding of the medieval period of the Indian history, that comes from the written sources. which includes both religious and also non-religious sources. That means under literary sources we have religious and non-religious sources, which you can find in the form of, as I've told you, you can find in the form of court chronicles, you can find in the form of biographies, autobiographies, right? And this literary sources usually is categorized into indigenous and foreign writing. Okay, underline that. The literary sources usually categorized into indigenous and foreign writing, covering subjects such as religious, economic, politics, culture, etc. A variety of language such as Persian, Sanskrit, Arabic, Urdu, and many other regional languages were used to produce this bulk of writing. Just hold on, I'm just seeing one of the line. Alright, let us continue. Where am I? Yeah, the literary sources usually categorized into indigenous and foreign writings, covering subjects of religious, economic, political, or you can say the politics, the culture, etc. And the languages which are used for literary sources are the Persian, Sanskrit, Arabic, Urdu, and also some other regional languages as well. It is very interesting to note that paper was still not in use in the Indian subcontinent during the early medieval period. Underline early. Early means the beginning. Whenever we get the term early, beginning, late means during the end. Okay. So during the early medieval period, in the beginning of the medieval period, this is what you call paper was still not in use. And what was used? Where was it written? It was written on palm leaves, bark of birch trees, and animal skins were used as materials for writing. Mm. You're so lucky that you have paper now. Even your notebooks you do not maintain properly. Imagine writing in palm leaves, finish. It will fly away. Right, my dear children? Yeah, so where am I? Yes. So it was palm leaves, bark of birch tree, underline all those. Animal skins which were used as materials for writing. It was only in the late medieval period that paper became the main writing material. Late, during the end of the medieval period. Okay, that paper became the main writing material. Literary sources of medieval history can be divided into again following categories, that is court chronicles, biography, autobiography, and many more, like foreign traveler, indigenous, and what do you call this, religious, regional. So the subcategories of literary sources. I hope you got a picture of literary sources, the writing sources of information, okay, about the past. And about the different types of writing sources of information about the past, we will see in the next class. I'll end up the class out here. Please go through whatever has been discussed of today's class, and especially the one which I've asked you to underline. You'll get questions from there. Later on, do not tell me, sir, what is the answer? I don't know. I haven't come across this. If you listen to the explanation, each and every word which is important, every line I'm asking you to underline, and questions will be framed from there. Alright? So go through it, study well. God bless you all.